Zou dat hem zijn geweest? Horen jullie... Wacht even hoor. Horen jullie mij nu? Dammit. Wat is er mis? Waarom hoorde ik mezelf net prima met het geluidtest? En hoor ik nu geen ene donder meer? Oh wacht, dat was dom. Wat heb ik nou gedaan? Deze moet ik even niet gebruiken. Dat gaat goed. Ja, maar nu moet ik... Ja. En dat. En dat. Ja. Oké, ik hoor mezelf, maar ik hoor jullie niet. Ik heb geen flauw idee waarom. Zelfdes werkt, microfoon werkt. Hij is verbonden, mijn computer hoort het. De stream hoort het. Fuck. Wacht even. Maar als ik hen hoor... Test, test. Test, test. Even kijken of dit helpt dan. Waarom... Oeps, Oh, dan zou ik buiten verder te horen. Oh ja, maakt ook niet uit. wacht. Master level. Probeer nog eens voor jezelf.
Ja, ik ben aan het praten.
Oké, ja. Ik heb de master... Ah, kijk, de computer zegt nu dat er weer wat is.
Zullen we anders gewoon even de call, de Zoom call terminaten en misschien een nieuwe opstarten? Wacht, begin met de telefoon. Maakt het zin om de Zoom call opnieuw te doen? Wanneer zegt de computer fuck dit?
Kan ik proberen. Ik moet hem even opnieuw inloggen. Probeer ik nu.
Ja, we zullen het even deze Zoom call doen again. Let's try that.
Plap. Oh, misschien is dat het geweest. Dat zou heel duf zijn, maar...
Ja. De hele team is terug en jij?
Ja, ik heb een idee. Dat zou het best wel eens ook geweest kunnen zijn trouwens. Kijken of dit lukt. Ik ben nu aan het connecten. Join. Oh, Start.
Ja, ben jij nog? Even?
Ja.
Hey!
Ah, je hoort hem op meerdere manieren nu. Dan denk ik dat ik hem heb.
Ja. Ja, je hebt hem wel. Alleen we krijgen nu Martin te horen via jou.
Dat is dan nu als het goed is opgelost.
Nee, nu niet meer.
Oké, gelukkig.
Oké, ik heb de oplossing gevonden. Ik had Zoom gestart via de weblink in plaats van Zoom op te starten daar in die client in te loggen. En blijkbaar vindt hij dat niet grappig.
Nee.
Dus ik was guest en dat mocht niet of zo.
We have solved it, Abhishek, so we're gonna start, I guess.
Yeah, technically the stream...
Geduldig, ik ben aan het mediteren hiervan.
Basically, hello everybody. There was a bit of delay, sound issues, but people should be hearing me now. And if anybody can confirm, please do so in the comments. On YouTube not. Oh, that's too bad. What is going on over here now? That works. Level, check. I'll restart the stream. Hola. Ja, nu heb je nu niet meer het logo als het goed is. Mooi. Top. So, welcome everybody to the first OWASP virtual chapter meeting of 2022. There were some issues technically with the sound, as you might have noticed that you heard something, but not everything. And currently on screen is Martin, our chairman, of the Netherlands chapter. Martin, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello, welcome all of you. So I don't have a presentation, just want to quickly share the updates and infos from global perspective and the Netherlands
So first, welcome to this new year. I hope new year, new chances. For me, it was new chance. I got COVID now, so at least it's the weak version variant, and I'm vaccinated. So first thing we want to have this new opportunity for this year is to restart our chapter, and we plan to have an OWASP chapter meeting virtually as long as required every third Thursday of the month. So it's the first one, and we're already organizing the next one. So book your agenda, same time, same spot, every third Thursday of the month. Next time we try to find people, we are also already talking to them about the Log4j disaster that kept people like off the streets on holiday, but off the streets with COVID, it's funny, isn't it? So somebody said my sound is not hard enough. Maybe we can make some regulation on the sound.
Yep,
adjustment.
will do.
Thank you. So, as said, we have planned it for the first half of the year. Another thing is already book your agenda. Unfortunately, we did not have the OWASP Benelux Day last year due to COVID for the new change regulations in Belgium. And now it will be, it's no joke, the 1st of April will be the OWASP Benelux Day 2021. 1st of April 22. And then, of course, the 31st of March, we are looking to organize a training day with normal, always free for all OWASP members, and have a social event in the evening from the 31st to the 1st. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to welcoming you in Belgium for the OWASP Benelux Day. It will happen soon. That said, there's also another initiative. So we saw him briefly online. So Irvan, he has now taken the opportunity to start a new project, and he wants to quickly introduce that. Irvan, please.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you, Martin. Great news that we are starting this positively at the year. Just want to brief you guys with two initiatives that I've started together with a group of people. The first one is that with a group of thought leaders on AppSec in the Netherlands, we have set up and executed 2 workshops now. Actually, the workshops were executed this week, where we came together and discuss whether we see opportunities from an AppSec perspective that OWASP can play a role in either executing a project which will deliver a standard, or maybe tooling, or even guidance to improve AppSec within the industry in the Netherlands, but also globally. And they were great. The workshop was really great. So please stay tuned. We're going to be posting some information on that in our different channels for OWASP in the Netherlands. And concretely, the output would be ideas of projects that can be executed by the community. That's one part of the update. Please stay tuned on that. Secondly, one of the things that we're going to do for sure is create a framework guidance as one of the projects where we're going to write and give guidance on how to set up security champions community within within the organizations for smaller, larger enterprises. And it's not going to be just a guidance, it's going to be a framework that will, address different sort of dimensions, right? It's going to be a process, it's going to be the mandate, it's going to be, how to use tooling into that. And it's not only going to be about how to set it up, but how to maintain that community as we go. So we're going to formally spin off a project for that one. So anyone that's interested to participate in that project, contribute, whatnot, please contact me. And more of these projects will be coming up that will be executed and proposed to OWASP Netherlands and just globally from this workshop that we have done. So please stay tuned. That's would be my update that I want to give. And thank you a lot for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for your involvement and initiative. Looking forward to have more coming back from that. So, Edwin, I don't know, are you here online? Can you hear me? Will you be the host for the rest of the day?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay.
Have fun.
Will do. All right, thank you. So, what we have today is two speakers on the topic of threat modeling, and the first, and I hope it's pronounced correctly, Abhishek. I hope so. Who will be given a presentation on the scalability of threat modeling. To be precise, a story on scaling threat modeling across 500 plus DevOps teams. So, Abhishek, if you can hear me, I think
yeah,
start
I
sharing your
can
screen.
hear you.
And the floor
Sure.
is yours.
Sure.
Welcome.
Okay. I think is it disabled for participant screen sharing?
Oh, oops. That might be the... that should solve it. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Try that. Yeah. I hope everyone is able to see it now.
Not yet.
Not yet. How's it?
Now we do some see
Okay.
screen. Yep.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for Edwin for setting up this stage. And hello everyone. Thanks for having me here today to tell you a story of scaling threat modeling across 500 teams in ABN Amro. And before I jump to the topic, I would like to give a short introduction about me. So, who am I? Hope you already know my name and then pronounce it correct. But my name is Abhishek Goel, and I started as a full stack web application developer back in 2010. And since beginning, I was very fascinated about application security. And in 2012, I got the opportunity to switch into application security domain. And since then, I'm working with various clients over the globe as an employee or as a consultant, and I enabled threat modeling capability for the organizations, and also conducted many threat modeling workshops for them. For last few years, I am employed in ABN Amro as a security engineer, and here I'm responsible for enabling security in DevSecOps, and as an IT lead for threat modeling capability. So since beginning as a professional, as a security professional, I work very closely with the developers or dev teams. And also being a developer, I experienced that switching from one mindset of a developer to another mindset of as an attacker, especially when you have to break your own application, it's not easy thing, right? But thanks to the community like OWASP, where awesome people continuously, enabling security and helping people like me to grow in this area and develop this mindset, which is needed to do security in a right way. So a big thank you for the OWASP community members and the participants. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my story today. On that note, let's move forward. So what is threat modeling? When I started, as I said, it was not very easy to switch from developer to security mindset. And threat modeling helped a lot. It helped me to understand how to do security, especially in web application. Please don't worry, I'm not going to take you in detail what threat modeling is and how to do it. I just want to give a high-level refresher on it. So as we all know that threat modeling is a systematic approach to discover security flaws and identify the security requirements proactively. It helps the teams to know what are the valuable assets they are working upon, and who is the adversary, and so for whom it is valuable for apart from the business and the clients. what are the potential weaknesses make it possible for an attacker to gain unauthorized access to the valuable assets, how to block or protect their assets from these potential security incidents, and in the end ensure that risk has been mitigated or reduced to an acceptable level. So it is not a new concept. For many decades, I mean, for last 10, 15 years, there are so many methodologies has been developed, so many papers has been published. But in last few years, the adoption of threat modeling has increased. And let's see what happened that we also started with threat modeling and what forced us to scale it up further. Okay, so back in 2019, IT transformation program was started in ABN Amro. So teams has to adopt the DevOps culture, the DevOps way of working, and where they will get the autonomy, which not just increase the responsibility for Dev and Ops, but for security as well. And therefore, it became a compliance requirement for CISO to demonstrate that these DevOps teams, which are going to use public cloud, will be in control and in compliant mode, and they should be able to manage the security, not for their product, but the environment as well, because now they have the responsibility end to end, right? So for that, we found, okay, some security capabilities has already been standardized and integrated in the pipeline, right? We have SAST and the credential scanners, dependency checks for open source dependency analysis tools, and their integration with the IDE plugins. It really helps to shift security left in the DevOps lifecycle. But still, there is a scope to shift security further left in the planning or design phase to address the design challenges. Though penetration testing is there, which has a capability to identify these design flaws, depends who is doing the pen testing, what is his experience in this approach, but it occurs very late in the process. And afterwards, mitigation of the identified issues is very costly and it's not time effective as well. And because penetration testing is another problem in the DevOps lifecycle, because it's a time-consuming thing, therefore, to scope for each release, what should be the pen tested is needed, which became another responsibility for the team. For each release, they have to create the scope of their pen testing. And apart from these automated security assessments, other security processes needs to be followed by the DevOps teams, like risk assessment, right? And these non-automated security processes create extra friction in the speed of DevOps. So it became a intrinsic need for CISO and for us as a security professional in ABN Amro to find out some solution or security controls to enable security culture in the team. And when we try to find out, okay, what could be the possible solution? So yeah, we landed with threat modeling, right? So we made threat modeling as a mandatory step in the DevSecOps journey of the teams. And we really wanted to nurture the security culture and enable security design thinking, along with the other automated security assessment tooling, which is already part of this CICD or these DevOps processes. It also helped to shift security further left in the planning phase, as we all know about it. And it enabled developers or DevOps teams to identify the potential threats, not just related to the technology, what they are using. There are plenty of tools already which can identify these weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the technology used. But the business logic or the processes they are designing to deliver the business. So they can identify these potential threats, weaknesses of their systems, and to their applications, and generate those security requirements to mitigate those threats. It also complements other security assessments in the pipeline. So especially the dynamic and pen testing. Now teams can create their scope of their pen test based on the threats they identified and the countermeasures they implemented to mitigate those threats. And in the pen test, they ask the pen tester to assure that these countermeasures are working effectively and the threat or the weaknesses has been mitigated properly. It also enables to do agile risk management. So sooner they identify the risk, better the position to manage it. It will help them to prioritize the mitigation, not from the compliance perspective, but based on the risk, right? So if they know, okay, this particular threat is more severe on my business case, then yeah, this should be my priority. I want to mitigate this, rather I focus on some other stuff, which is not that important right now. So they can pick it up in their next sprints. It also provides a way to do a continuous evaluation of this changing threat landscape, right? So in their next iteration, maybe they found new emerging threats. So for now, let's say ransomware is a new emerging threat. So in their next iteration, they can put some effort to identify if their system or application is susceptible for these new emerging threats. And ultimately, it will enable them to deliver a product which is secure by design. So how did we start? Yeah. So how did we start at ABN Amro? So first of all, we established a CISO capability, which is a small group of people which knows about threat modeling, how to do it, and what is the best way to do it. And we established this threat modeling capability to enable threat modeling in the organization. We developed training materials and started spreading awareness about the threat modeling and started teaching to the teams how to do it and what is the easiest way to do this threat model. And for that, we chose a STRIDE methodology with whiteboarding approach. So we didn't start with some, very complex methodology, but we just chose a STRIDE and chose whiteboard approach. And to maintain the threat model in the digital way, we chose our existing tool sets available in the bank, Draw.io for DFDs and Confluence for managing the threat models. Also, we not just invested in the teaching, we also invested heavily in the workshop. So first we teach them, okay, what is it, how to do it, but we also help them to transfer this learning in the practical. And we spend almost 6 to 8 hours per team just to make them or as a hands-on workshop. And in that workshop, we pick one of their use case, what they are building or working upon, and just do a threat model on that. And as a result, DevOps teams welcomed this initiative. They recognized the added value. They appreciate it a lot. And then it triggered for us like, okay, if we can succeed for these 50 or 60 teams or 40, 50 teams, then let's go for a next level. And then it became a question for us, like when we have already done it for 40 to 50 teams, and next we need to require to do it for 500 teams, then what could be the challenges? And this is my question to you, to the audience. You can just log into Menti. You can scan this QR code and share your ideas, like or what do you think could be a challenge for us to scale it up. I hope you guys can log in the. I can only see one person is there, and I hope that is only me. Irfan, can you check if you are able to join this
One
meeting?
small notification, the stream is about a minute behind on your speech for buffering reasons, so users might take a while to log in.
Okay.
I was able to submit, Abhishek.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay, I can see few responses so far. How many people we have in as an audience today? Do we have any number?
About 40 at the moment.
Okay. Okay, 4 people. Lack of consistent language, monitoring of progress, adoption. The people are increasing, so let's give a few more minutes. Punishment, candy, wow. Amount of trainers, nice. Okay. Management, commitment, great. Yeah, I think we are almost matching the find 500 teams. Yeah, I mean, without having that number, it will be very difficult in a big organization. How many teams are there? But yeah, that's a good one. Time to do models. Mm-hmm. Great. So I think we have responses from 15 people. I think we can move further. Great. You can add on, but I think it's time to move on. So let's see what challenges we have. So to having this goal in mind, we started gathering the feedback from the teams, because it is a very crucial thing in DevOps. Without having proper feedback, and if you can't acknowledge it, you cannot sell your product in the market. So what they said, they appreciated the initiative, but time consuming. It's 6 to 8 hour long for a DevOps team. It's not easy for them to take out that time from their sprints. They have to deliver value to the business. Also, new team members are joining, so whose responsibility it is to train them. So as per the program, yeah, we chose the team. Okay, these teams are there for to start as a DevOps, so let's train them as a team. But later on, if some rotation is happening and new team members are joining in, so who will train those teams? Not looking at the threat model, so it's not sustainable. Teams are not updating their threat models after they completing their workshops and trainings. The components are outside of the team's scope. So a team is consuming a component from another team, and they don't know when that team is going to do a threat model on their component, and they are not responsible for this component. How to consume threat model in other security processes? Okay, we created a threat model, we identified certain threats. So how to prioritize the risk? how to create a scope out of it for my threat for my pen testing. Same component, different risk assess. So the consistency was not there, right? Teams are using same components, same type of components, and according to their understanding or their gain, knowledge gain in the concept, there is a difference in the assessment and how to automate backlog management. So without automation in DevOps, I think nothing is possible. So yes, we also get these feedbacks, like how can we automate to manage these countermeasures as a backlog so that we can plan them in our sprints. So having these feedbacks from the teams, we also did some brainstorm as a capability owners, and we also found our own challenges, resource management. So trainers, finding a good trainer is not an easy job, right? And our approach was very resource intensive. So finding and maintaining these resources, it was quite impossible. Training quality, because the training was provided by the human being, and different people has different style to deliver the training, though we are sharing the same training material across the team trainers, but the quality, yeah, it was a challenge. Then follow up with non-performing teams. So right now, for example, we did it for 50, 60 teams, and because of this feedback process, we identified plenty of teams are not doing threat modeling afterwards. So if we go beyond that with the same approach, how is going to be sustained? How we are going to identify and help those teams which are not performing afterwards? Integration and automation. How can we enable, or how can we enable our approach to integrate with other processes and DevOps tooling? So it became a challenge to make this capability sustainable and scalable with the current approach. So what we did, we revamped our approach and we came up with this threat modeling as a service concept. We balanced people, processes, and tooling in this new approach, right? So what we did for people. So as I said, that our previous approach was quietly dependent on the people, on the trainers. So to increase our workforce, we started train the trainers program within the organization. So within CISO, we have plenty of other security professionals. They are very good in security, but yeah, training is not always everyone's cup of tea. So we started training them so that we can get their help as and when needed. Also to do this threat modeling activity afterwards, after the training and workshop in the teams, we use security champions. So in ABN Amro, we are already running this security champion program where we are picking up, or we are asking the teams to volunteer 1 or 2 people per team for security as a security champion who can drive the security agenda or security topics within their team. So we also training them. We are also training them to moderate the security or this threat modeling sessions within the team. So next topic was the process. How can we develop a nice process so that it is easy to consume? And with the help of our developers, with the trainers, we created a self-service e-learning training program. So our talented trainers, they created a bunch of videos, small short videos, and using this self-service platform in the bank, teams can enroll themselves for this training, and they can do this training as per their convenience and the flexibility, right? But we not just leaving the teams on this digital knowledge. We afterwards we always conduct a small session with them, a small interactive session with them, to understand what is their gain in the training, what they understood, do they have any questions or concerns. Also, we also gather their feedback on the training material. How was the content? And based on that, we improvise it for further. But we didn't leave our workshop part. So we still do the workshop, but yes, it is less intensive now. The overall timeline, which was earlier 6 to 8 hours, now it has been reduced to 2 hours in total, including that small interactive session or feedback session and plus the workshop. And in the workshop, then we are helping the teams to implementing that knowledge in practical. And this time we chose a commercial tool for doing the threat modeling, right? And there are so many tools available in the market, open source as well as commercial. So we evaluated a bunch of them, and as I said, like without having a proper integration and automation with in DevOps area, it is very hard, to sell your services to them. So after our evaluation, we chose Erios Risk, and this tool was easy to implement in ABN Amro environment and was compatible with the tooling which we were already using in our previous approach. And what did it bring to us? So what was the added value and what magic it created basically? So the core quality of the tool is their threat model, threat library, their rule engine, and the questionnaire. So threat library is a you can consider it as a register or of common threats and their standard mitigation measures. So if a team is developing their threat model on this tool, they can pick up one component in their DFD, and based on that component and linked threat library, some threats and their associated countermeasures added in the threat model itself. So they don't need to reinvent the threats which is already known and the underlying weaknesses and their countermeasures. And rule engine of the tool, it make it easy to automate, right? It automates how to identify, what to identify, and how to apply these common risk patterns and generate the security requirements, which is based on either a questionnaire. So we can produce a questionnaire either at a product level or a particular component level, where a team can answer those questions, and based on the answer, a rule will run in the background and an action will be performed. And that action could be adding new threats or risk pattern to the threat model, or changing the state of a countermeasure, right? So based on these questionnaires, we can fine tune the threat model itself and identify some tangible security requirements for the team. It also mapped with the industry standards, right? So after the analysis of identified threats and the countermeasures, they can apply these standards on those countermeasures, which can help them to prioritize the countermeasures which they should apply or implement first. If they are developing a system where they are dealing with the credit card data or payment like stuff, then PCI DSS is the framework which they would like to comply with. And based on their threat model in the tool, they can identify, okay, these are the countermeasures which I have to implement to comply with this this particular standard. Integration with ALM tools, right? So application lifecycle management tools, for example, Jira or Azure DevOps. So this tool is very well integrated with these ALM tooling. And now team need to put their effort to identify new threats to their process or the business logic they are developing, and analyze the identified threats based on the technology or the component of the technology they are using in their product. And once they are done, they can create these countermeasures as a user story or task based on the configuration in the system on their corresponding backlog management tool. And from there, they can plan it based on either risk or based on their standard or compliance framework. They can plan it in their sprints. It also integrates with the leading security tooling. So, for example, Fortify is a leader in the market for SAST or apps. There are other bunch of DAS tooling, for example, OWASP ZAP. So it also integrates with these tooling, and what it does basically, it collects this the information identified by these tooling, the vulnerability, and process it and map it back to the existing threats. And if it recognizes that some threat is not listed in the threat model, so it also add those new threats and associated weaknesses in countermeasure. So it really helps the team to fix these issues by design in the architecture of the product, not just applying a patch to mitigate the instance of that particular issue, which they can also test. So it also well integrate with other with various testing frameworks, so that teams can rely on their unit testing rather they wait for a pen test to go further. And it also provide the REST API to access the core components, and we can also create our custom dashboard using this API. We can identify how many threat models there are, how many associated threats and countermeasures identified, and where they are. So we can create a nice trend chart, which is a custom thing, not in the tool, but yeah, we can customize it based on using this REST APIs. But the tool itself provide you different reports format. So you can create a PDF report or CSV as per your requirement. And for us, it was the similar approach which we were teaching to the teams in our previous approach, Stride and all those things. So the flow in the tool was same, what we were teaching in our training. And their interactive dashboard for threat and countermeasure projects and portfolio gives us a centralized dashboard. How many threat models are there, which teams have onboarded on threat modeling, and how they are performing, which means when they updated their threat model last. So we can identify, okay, these teams have not updated their threat model in last, for example, 3 months. So we start reaching out to those teams, and our trainers or enablers, basically, they help the team to fix their challenges if they have any, right? Customization. So you can customize the threat libraries. You can add your own threats or threat libraries based on your organization threat landscape. You can create your own rules. You can tweak the existing rule, as well as you can create your own rules. You can add your own standard. So yeah, ABN Amro bank is compliance driven. So yeah, you can convert your compliances into a standard in the tool. You can also create your own questionnaire to assess a certain scenario associated with certain products, type of products, or technology. So customization is really helps you to fine tune the tool according to your organization, right? And yeah, it was easy to deploy, maintain, and access. So it is well integrated with single sign-on, and they have different deployment strategies, SaaS, and they have containers as well, and they have full-fledged installation of the tool, and it's easy to maintain. So if you are just using SaaS, then yeah, you are not responsible. It will be upgraded and maintained by the vendor itself. So I don't know how we are doing on the time. Edwin, can you help us?
So, sorry.
Do we have some time left?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
About 12 minutes for you.
Okay, great. Then, yeah, I would like to give a very high level demo on the tool. So let me just set it up. Yeah. Okay. How can I move it? Yeah, that's great. So as I said, like you can create new project in the system, right? So and you can also use API. So if you want to create a nice onboarding workflow using the existing tooling in your organization, so you can use the APIs to create new project. And if a project is already exist, for example, we can take one project. So if the project is already exist, and in the next iteration you want to initiate a new version out of it, so you can also create a new version of the same project. So it always starts with the architecture by default, but you can also design your a product level questionnaire. So as soon as you create a new product in the system, that questionnaire will pop up, and based on your answer, rule engine will do its magic, and threats and countermeasures will be added at the product level. But let's go to the architecture and let's see what they have there. So they always start with the zones. So whatever architecture you are designing here, first you have to select a zone. Without having a zone, you cannot create or you cannot design a threat model. And there are plenty of trust zones they have already designed, but you can also come up with your own trust zones, and you can assign certain values to these trust zone, which will help you to identify the risk, all the components in that zone. So you can take that in your calculation basically. Now they came up with so many default components. So it depends. If you are from the automotive industry, you can use their automotive components. But if you are just developing a web application, right? So you can choose their web application server side application or component, and you can simply drag and drop it in the architecture. And here to fine tune. So as soon as you just drag and drop this component in the architecture, it will include all the default threats associated with this component. But for each component, there is a questionnaire attached, And that questionnaire, I cannot, how can I hide this thing? Hide video file. Yeah. Okay. So they can, so you can complete the questionnaire associated with the component, and this questionnaire will help you to fine tune the threats and their countermeasures associated with this component. So you can choose what type of assets it is processing. So for example, if I select, yeah, it is processing credit card details. So it will add more questions based on the answer you select. So yeah, there are different types of rules you can design. Either you can add more questions by answering a question, or you can tweak with the threats and the countermeasures in the in the system. So based on your architecture, you would just update the model, and this functionality will fetch out all the threats and countermeasures and put it in the threat and countermeasure part. So here teams can analyze the identified threats, and for each threat it tells about you, okay, what is the impact on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is the default settings. So you can also tweak based on your analysis. So yeah, if the application is internal, or what factors you are taking in consideration to identify the impact. So based on that, you can tweak the CIA rating, and how easy it would be for an attacker to exploit this particular threat, right? By exploiting these associated vulnerabilities. So if you see, yeah, this threat makes sense for this component and it is applicable, then you can see what weaknesses it poses to your application, and you can, based on that, you can create a new issue in your backlog management tool, which you can plan in the sprint. So this is the one way to do that. And next is the countermeasure tab, where you can just see the countermeasures you have to implement to make this particular component secure, right? So these are the default threats and countermeasures. What about the threats associated, the business logic or the process you are automating in this component or in this web application? So you can also add your own use cases. So if I add a custom use case here, and yeah, and I can add identified or new threats, which I think, right, it's a new threat to my process. But if there are some threats which are coming from other components or from other threat libraries, so I can also add the threats from other threat libraries in the system. And what are those other threat libraries? So let's look into the threat libraries. So it comes with the with very huge threat libraries, and the most important one, their CAPAC threat library, and they are OWASP MASVS threat library, and their CS default threat library, which are nothing but the policies, security policies. So if I go to this particular threat library, so for in each threat library, they have risk patterns, and these risk patterns have use cases underneath, and those use cases have threats and weaknesses, and for each weakness they can design a countermeasure how to mitigate that particular weakness for that threat. So that's how they consist of different threat libraries, and yeah, the rules. So this is the backbone of this tool: threat libraries, rules, and components. And here you can design rule either on a component level, so that rule will run on a component based on the condition, and component means on any component. You can design a rule on a questionnaire. A main questionnaire means a questionnaire which is associated at the product level, not at the component level. Also the data flow. So as soon as you join those two components and you create a data flow from one component to another component, based on that as well, you can design your own rules. So yeah, you define a certain condition, or if there is no condition, that action will be performed every time based on the module you select. But if you select a particular condition, then that action will be taken, executed by this rule engine. Yeah, so that's a very high level, I would say, a summary of or the overview of the tool. And in the end, you can export the reports in different formats. Yep. So that's all for my side, and I hope you enjoyed this story of scalability of threat modeling in ABN Amro. Any questions?
Okay, it seems like
don't
it's
know.
time for us to take a look at the YouTube comments. There, of course, the stream is a bit of a delay, so please stand by while we're trying to
Sure, no problem.
read the comments. Okay, I see there were a couple of questions. Training just to be able to use. Lego UCS states, "Oh, does look like you need another training just to be able to use the tool." And Peter Rekers asks, "How do you enforce countermeasures actually being applied?"
Yeah, so definitely another training, how to use the tool. So as I said, we changed our approach to train the teams, where we created two parts of that teaching. One is based on the pure concept of threat modeling, what is the value add and why we should do it and how we should do it. And second is very specific to the tooling. And in the tooling itself, for the teams, it is just about, okay, how to draw their architecture on the tool, because rest of the thing is taken care by the development or our core capability team. They help or they onboard the team or their product in the tool centrally, and teams are enabled to create this architecture. Though in the previous approach as well, they were using draw.io, so they are very much familiar with the tool, because Aegis Risk in the background, it also use draw.io. And if they have already done their threat model in the Confluence, then we can simply import that diagram here, and we map those components to the Aegis Risk components, and it will generate the threats and the countermeasures based on that. So definitely the training is needed, but it is not that intensive, which can create another problem for the DevOps teams from learning perspective. And what was the next question?
The next question was from Martin Pearson. Do you have any views of the risk of putting this kind of information in the cloud? It looks like a SaaS application.
Yeah. So definitely for each SaaS application, there is a risk associated. And in the bank, we have a vendor security management capability, which assess the vendor and the solution they are provided in as a SaaS and how secure it is. So yeah, it is not like that we found this tool and we just pay the money and then using a subscription. It doesn't happen like that. So it went through a process, and it is already been informed to compliance and other parties who is involved to have this SaaS solution in the bank.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this information. For all the participants, if you do have any remaining questions, please ask them in the comment and we will relay them to Abhishek afterwards. The screen will go to the event logo now for a quick break, so grab a cup of coffee, beer, tea, or whatever else you prefer. And in 7 minutes, I think, the next talk will begin, which is Grant Ongers with the gamification of threat modeling. Abhishek, thank you again, and please join us in watching the
Thank you, everyone.
next one.
Yeah, bye.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of our OWASP Netherlands chapter virtual meeting. This presentation will be given by Grant Ongers on the gamification of threat modeling. Grant, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm going to be talking about gamification and threat modeling. Abhishek showed you how you can scale it. This is another way of scaling approaching that same problem. Hang on one second. I've got audio coming through from the other side, which I will kill. There we go. So gamification of threat modeling. This is going to be an introduction to OWASP Cornucopia, a project that I'm one of the co-leads on, and something called COPI. So threat modeling is becoming an essential part of building secure systems. US Executive Order 14028 to improve nations' cybersecurity mandates threat modeling as part of the minimum standard for verification. OWASP Top 10 from 2021 puts insecure design at number 4 of the top 10 risks to business. Now, scaling threat modeling to cover your whole organization, you need to put the capability into the hands of the right people, into the development teams. Agile threat modeling provides a focus for development teams to think critically about system design and how it can be attacked. So let's jump into it. Threat modeling is about seeing your app as an attacker would. Abhishek did a really good job taking you through some of the original things. I'm not going to run through this in any detail, but that's STRIDE, spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. STRIDE is 22 years old. And a couple of years ago, Adam Shostak did a write-up on it on its 20th anniversary on dark reading. And it's still well used, as Abhishek showed you. They're making good use of it. Problem is that threat modeling traditionally happens in a waterfall development process right up the frontier. So this is old school development, waterfall. This is where you get to do your threat modeling, right? You get one shot to do it right. And if you mess it up, you end up fixing all your problems in prod. The same slide or same view of things that Abhishek showed as well, agile development process, we get a chance to change things here. But it is a small release, right? So each time we go through this, we get to change things. We get to review things. We get to modify what the output looks like, what the product looks like. And we can take input from here, how it operates, and here, how we do testing. And actually, we can use the entire cycle of the application to rethink about how we're going to do things better. And that's also true for security. One of the slides Abhishek showed talked briefly about the 4 questions, about the 4 areas of security. And these 4 questions are, what are we working on? It's essential to have a clear view on the system that you're threat modeling and the scope that we control and what's outside that scope. We need to know what could go wrong. There's a potentially infinite universe of calamities, right? Cornucopia, what we're going to talk about just now, helps us to focus on the possible with a relatively simple framework. Then we go on to what are we going to do about it? So once you've established that an issue is a real issue, potential issue, then you have to capture the work that comes out of that. With Agile threat modeling, this goes straight into the backlog for prioritization. And then did we do a good job? Again, with Agile, because we go through that infinite loop, we've got lots of chance to review how well the work we've done in the previous iteration has affected the threats that we're seeing in the next one. So Agile threat modeling takes time, right? And it's we design for threat modeling using the design phase, but it does take time. The larger the piece of functionality that we're going to be working on, the more time it takes. And as the product evolves, it's going to change over time. Our understanding must also evolve. This leads to a couple of issues, though. Number one is we tend to model things too late. It's generally done mostly by security. And when do we, the security folks, get our hands on designs? It's not normally before coding starts. And if it is, are we now holding up delivery because they can't start working at something? So Stephen and Avi, who run the OWASP threat modeling project, talk about when threat modeling should happen, ideally. Now, of course, it doesn't tell us anything we didn't know, right? The sooner the better, but never too late. The second problem that comes up is how much time is enough time? And Adam Shostak, in his blog on magical approaches to threat modeling, asks for a fourth option to the three magical approaches he describes, one that doesn't result in too many threats. The question is, when should we stop looking for threats? And that's when our threat models are going to be good enough, I think, right? Inaccurate models don't help. So we need to have good enough threat models. George Box says all models are wrong, but some can be useful. He goes on to say, is the model good enough for this particular application? So we have our answers now. We need a threat model that's good enough. We need to build it using what time we can afford, using whatever time we have available, and as early as possible in the process as we can get. In our world, that tends to be at story scrubbing or backlog grooming. Call that whatever you like, but it's the point in time before stories are added to a sprint to be worked on, and it's where the acceptance criteria are defined for this piece of work we're going to be building, the piece of functionality we're going to be building. This work always happens, right? We're always going to be looking at what's coming up next on the backlog, and we're expecting non-functional requirements to come out of the process. So it's time boxed, it's time that we're already spending, and we expect to have acceptance criteria, which would include those non-functional requirements. And we stop when we have enough information to build the thing that we want to build, when we can fulfill the acceptance criteria, the definition of done. Remember, we get to iterate, right? So this is not a once and done, we can get to do more later. But why do we gamify threat modeling? This is kind of the crux of this presentation and why Cornucopia and why Copy exist. And it's basically because we like to compete. Threat modeling isn't fun, usually because it involves security folk tearing apart things that other people have built. And that's not particularly pleasant for the developers who are building it, unless the security team, are psychopaths. But it's not fun for us either, right? Because we don't actually think in terms of breaking down the thing that you've built and showing you how horrible it is. But we think in terms of building this new thing, this threat model, this thing that we need to create. But games are fun, especially when there are prizes. And whenever we run through these exercises with customers, we definitely try to ensure that there's somebody who's forking out for the prizes. We use two games to do threat modeling, Cornucopia, which is what Copy was built to do online, and Elevation of Privilege. Now, Elevation of Privilege is the next iteration of threat modeling that was kind of codified in the threat modeling book that Adam Shostak wrote. It takes the security's point of view, and it uses Stride, and it breaks down threats using Stride. So if you're using Stride in your organizations, then the gamification version of that is going to be Elevation of Privilege. Why Cornucopia, though? Well, mostly because Cornucopia is very developer focused. So it looks at things from the viewpoint of a developer, from how developers look at the world. And it builds on the shoulders of giants. It leverages other OWASP projects like the ASVS and other projects outside of OWASP like SafeCode to look for the particular types of threats while you're building particular features. So this is OWASP Cornucopia, right? It's a game built on a number of very well thought through projects. As I said, ASVS, SCP, App Sensor from OWASP, SafeCode, and then MITRE's Common Attack Pattern Enumeration Classification. It takes in some architectural designs, data flow diagrams, like you saw Aminesh talking about in the Irius Risk product. Just on that, reminds me, Irius Risk is a great product, but as OWASP, we don't recommend any specific products. Test the ones that are available to you if you're going to use a product and see if it works for you. So we start off with the architectural designs and some data flow diagrams, but don't get too hung up on the requirements here, mostly because they may not be accurate by the time you get a look at them or by the time they're created, at least initially. What is most important, though, is you need some time to play, and you need as many folks who are going to be building or testing the features that you're about to build as you can get involved in the process. And you need a will to get into it. You need someone to actually want to have this happen. The outputs of Agile threat modeling are going to be, this is the cornucopia score sheet, but it's going to result in some existing stories getting some security acceptance criteria, because security is a non-functional requirement, right? And it'll put some security into the context of a functional part of code. So this piece of code is going to do something. What is the security for the thing that it's going to do? And around those things that we, are building this feature for. And it'll probably help you update those diagrams. The ones that I said were probably out of date. If you're doing threat modeling, you're probably going to get a chance to actually update the diagrams. Often we see data flow diagram put up on the board, and halfway through the discussion, someone will go, wait, but hang on, there's this piece here now. We need to think about how that's dealing with a piece of data. And sure enough, we can add that to what's being shown, add that to what's visible in those diagrams afterwards. The outcomes of cornucopia or agile threat modeling, well, threat modeling can't just be an academic process, right? It must change the system in order for it to be useful. So we identify some issues, we get them on the backlog, and then we get product owners to sponsor that piece of work that's on the backlog so it actually gets fixed. Now, cornucopia is a card game, and I have decks of cards lying around all over the place here. But as a card game, it consists of several suits. First of which is authentication. It's a light blue colored suit, and they represent identity or who you are. Now, identity can be anything from an individual account, a multi-user system, all the way through to an API key that's assigned to a particular third-party application. But the point of it is to uniquely enough identify who or what is connecting to the solution. Different systems will have different requirements for identifying who in order to determine who did what or is trying to do what. And they'll be based on the type of system it is, how it's used, what kinds of functions it provides. But as a general rule, you want identity and auth-C as a result to be as specific as possible. Whenever you're dealing with any kind of identity in any kind of feature you're building, you should be thinking about how we're going to threat model that. The second suit is authorization, or auth-Z, to contrast it with auth-C, is a golden set of cards in cornucopia, and it's the what you can do to balance out who you are. Auth-Z is about access control, and it limits what functions an identified user of a system can execute against which data. Now, access control is often a matrix of rights and privileges, often inherent through some structure the solution provides, and it's usually coupled to a user via some kind of role, so role-based access control. And whenever you're talking about adding functionality or new data types, you should hear authorization, auth-Z. And it should trigger the bell in your mind that says, let's do some threat modeling around this. Access control is one of the hardest things to test for in an automated way. And it's very closely tied to business logic and the functionality built into a solution. So properly planning for it is essential. That's one of the places where threat modeling is, I would say, essential. Next deck of cards is session management. It's the green cards in the deck, and it's how we review and check auth-C and auth-Z for functions being executed and data being accessed. Terms usually used to define sessions against web services. This was originally the web application deck. But when threat modeling a system, think of it as being related to auth-C and auth-Z and rechecking those things in terms of time and potentially dangerous actions. Dangerous actions being things like account deletion or bulk data deletion or bulk data exports or changing passwords or contact details or something like that. Session management is the security point that most keenly needs to be balanced against usability. most secure session management is going to be reauth for every action. And reauth should be a lookup to make sure that access for this particular user is correct every time. Doesn't make it very usable though. So balance is required. Data validation and encoding. The silver cards in Cornucopia, these are every hacker's favorite. It's my favorite. And it's the cause of large chunks of all the history of OWASP top 10 lists. Fundamental concern here is going to be, and the phrase that you have to start associating with DVE is trust boundaries. Essentially, trust boundaries are the lines that you walk across, that you cross whenever you move from trusted to untrusted, or from untrusted to trusted. And it's at that point you want to perform one of those DVE actions, right? Validating input from users or not trusting users is how we generally describe those things, but it is broader than that, right? Trust boundaries set the line to where that is. When you pull data into your safe space from outside, validate it. When you push data out of your trusted zone, you want to try and encode it. Trust boundaries are not fixed, and they're not a global thing. They're not something that we can define in a sweeping way. It's going to sit very much somewhere where the risk appetite of your company or your project or the implementation of this particular solution or the team that's writing the particular code sees trust as being. Some teams, it's the network layer, right? If it comes in or goes out over the wire, you need to do DVE. Others set it in like cluster level. If it's local to a community's cluster, it's all trusted. Those are both probably a little broader than I'd like. Some set it at the module or even function level within their own code, which is probably a little bit too granular. But whatever it is, whenever you cross that boundary, data validation and encoding needs to happen. Cryptography, our purple cards in the deck, they cover a broad spectrum of things like actual encryption, hashing, and even obfuscation. It doesn't cover encoding, just to make it very clear that crypto is about secrets and how we keep them. Encryption translates data into another form, into an encrypted form, so that only people with access to a secret key or a decryption key or a password or whatever it is can read that data. Encrypted data we call ciphertext. Unencrypted data is plain text. Obfuscation is the process of concealing data, so hiding it, so it's not obvious. The analogy I like to use here is the one about cover versus concealment, right? If someone's throwing snowballs at you and you stand behind a large scrub, it probably provides you the concealment. They may not see you, as well as cover. Even if they do see you, they can't hit you with a snowball. If they're using a paintball gun, then maybe you want to move behind a tree to gain cover because they might not see you through the shrub. If they shoot at the shrub, they might get through. If they're using a bazooka, then you probably want to upgrade your cover to a concrete bunker. The same is true with encryption versus obfuscation, right? Pick your strength of cover to match your target and the attacker that you have. Hashing is practices using an algorithm to map data to a fixed length. We use it as an extreme form of encryption, one where there's no key, because we take something, we apply a function or an algorithm to it, and we end up with a secret that can never be decrypted. So it makes it impossible for that plain text to ever be recovered from the ciphertext. Encryption covers encryption at rest, and it also covers data on the move, so encryption in transit. It covers the whole suite of things there. That kind of is the top five of the decks, the top five of OWASP that the top 5 areas that you should be concerned with doing some threat modeling. There are other areas, of course, areas that don't fit neatly into one of those 5 discrete pockets. And they're all covered by the cornucopia, the dark blue deck, which is a miscellaneous suite of the game. And it covers off all those other things, as I said. Many of the attacks have to do with people and processes, how they interact with security. Some of them reflect in some way less obvious or less direct attacks, like 4 or the 7 of Cornucopia deal with attribution, so identity suites to some degree. The 5 of Cornucopia covers things like trust boundaries, so some combination of DVE and auth-z. The rest are things like data exposure via error and exceptional handling through to denial of service, with a couple of stops along the way to cover off things like third-party libraries, the build tools that you use, security misconfigurations, etc., etc., etc. Often the suit is excluded when learning to play the game, but once the team is very familiar with the mechanism of doing trumping with the Cornucopia suit and the types of attacks that it covers, it's almost never excluded, mostly because that trump action is important to the gamification side of things, and also because it covers circumstances that you can't easily exclude. If the features you're dealing with don't have anything to do with cryptography, then you can remove the cryptography suit from the deck. How do you actually play the game? Well, there are 9 steps, and those steps range from filtering the deck, like I said, to remove particular cards, all the way through to adding items on the backlog. Fortunately, RBI, who I'll be talking about in just a second, kindly could put together a video explaining it all. And I won't play the video for you here. It's less than 15-minute long. It takes you through the whole game with some examples included. That is the URL for the video, and you can go check it out there. As I said, less than 15 minutes. It'll show you examples. It'll run you through exactly everything that you need to know to play the game. It is also linked from the Cornucopia project page. There are a couple of other videos, and that link there, more videos below, that cover pieces of this presentation in sort of a threat modeling in a minute approach. So 9 videos in total, that essentially 9 minutes that cover everything I'm going to talk about now, or I have talked about so far. But where have we done this before? So have we done this at scale? Have we shown what this can do? Well, RBI have about 1,500 developers. I talk about them here because they were kind enough to pay for and provide free back to the community that video. The video was actually used internally at RBI to scale out threat modeling, to help teach without having to train trainers, without having to send me even further around the world than I did. But with 1,500 developers, I probably ran about 100 games in a year to get things up and running. So about 1 in 10 at RBI are indeed developers. RBI is dealing with some hard problems. Most of those hard problems that they're trying to solve are data related. So threat modeling, where that data is going to end up, is incredibly important to them. Portions of their business provide transaction filtering to most of the top 10 banks worldwide. So their customers, well, you've seen how important threat modeling is to the banking industry. So their customers want to see that their software and their solutions are properly protected against threats. But RBI is also born from a bunch of smaller businesses that are used to working very agilely. And they don't want to lose that agility. They don't want to lose that flexibility they have. The full quote from Jeff, who is the CISO at RBI, is threat modeling with Cornucopia empowers engineers to expand their application security knowledge through thought-provoking challenges, which in turn allow them to move fast more securely. And it's all about moving fast more securely. That is the key thing here. But how do you make it work? How do you take this and actually do something with it in your own environments? Well, the first thing is use the decks. Like, don't just deal down through the deck and then try to match possible issues. It doesn't work. The gamification side of things, the actual competition, that's incredibly important. Actually make time to play the game. And as I said, playing the game as part of the backlog scrubbing session is the best place to do it. Change it up. Not all the features need to be threat modeled. This is a bit of a controversial statement, but the reality is not all features need to be threat modeled, or it's not always the case that threat modeling this feature, it makes sense now. It's down the line that we see that there's potential for threats to come into it. and use the systems we have available. So use the things that you can do. Now, we live in a world where potentially I can't sit down around a table with developers and play the game, so I don't get to break out my physical cards. But that's changing. So, maybe physical cards are a thing. But there are other options, and I'll show you Copy just now. These are the project milestones that we had along the way. We moved away from Microsoft Word, which is where the cards were originally designed. And literally there was just a Word document, and that Word document, you had to then go and figure out a way to get the print versions out or print them out onto card, make them double-sided. It was complicated. We've moved to a more Git-friendly format. So it's YAML now. The first versions of those automated builds are done, along with whatever translations we have. So that's the repository, as you can see there. We are already triggering on change to the main branch that Word and HTML versions of the files, as well as the Adobe InDesign versions, are being output. So, we can already generate the Adobe InDesign files, which means that you can take that to a professional print shop and get cards printed. Or track me down at a conference at some point, and I'll probably have a bunch of decks with me. That's usually the case. The next part is to try and get PDFs printed, because Word isn't universal. HTML from Word is relatively simple. I'm struggling with the PDF thing. I don't know that it's still necessary, but people still ask for it. The problem is building PDF from Word as a serverless part of my Git pipeline. It's a bit difficult. If you have some thoughts, please reach out and help me. And then we made an app. Physical decks are cool, very cool, and I never want them to go away. But as I said, not all teams are the same physical space. Even pre-pandemic and even post-pandemic, dev teams across the world have to work together. And you can make cornucopia cards, physical decks, work remotely. I've done a bunch of sessions like that with a company called Agile Stationery, who actually make, I'll just shout out for them here, they make a much larger, prettier version of the deck, which is quite cool. I have done a few sessions like that, but it's not really easy for a project owner to set up a game. It's fairly complicated to do. There's now an easy way for a project owner just to hit create game and then sends out a link, and a very interactive web service that deals out the deck to the players, and everyone can play anytime they want, anywhere they want. It's pretty cool, which I will show you now. As I said, there's still some next steps, right? There's still things that we need to do. Cornucopia relies on the work of other projects like ASVS, as I mentioned. Now that we can build from source, we'd like to update the mappings to those projects to make them more interactive, like direct linking to the sections, things like that. There was also never meant to be just an e-commerce edition. There are other versions we'd like to make. IoT version comes to mind. So get involved, please. If you want to help move some of these things forward, that's the project repository, project page itself, and the repository page as well. And the second thing you do is actually use Copy. We need more beta testers. And there is an email address. So that's the URL to go play. And there is an email address that will come into us directly for us to take a look at. Yeah, please do make use of it. I guess my next step is, I can't, there was a demo in the previous session. I probably should do some kind of demo as well. I should probably show you what it looks like. And I'll pull that up while I take a look at some questions that are coming in. So, Lego UCS, where can I get physical decks of Cornucopia and NL? On the same place where to download it is a link. You can reach out to Secure Delivery. So you can reach out to me at Secure Delivery, or reach out to inquiries at Secure Delivery, and we'll send you a deck. We have a couple of them with which I should have somewhere around here. We have a couple of them with our logos or some logos of Copy on them. available. There isn't a tabletop simulator version, but there is, as I said, the online game. So this is what the Cornucopia Copy website looks like. It's simply copy.securedelivery.io. You can see that my privacy badger is very happy with me on this site, as there are no trackers. This is secure delivery contributing back to the project and contributing back to the community on this. You click start a new game. There's some explanation here. There'll probably be some videos at some point loaded up, but you can just skip straight past that. I mentioned that you can choose to play Cornucopia or Elevation of Privilege. There are cases where I think Elevation of Privilege is more logical or a better choice. Like if you're trying to do some threat modeling around infrastructure rather than application development, then probably EOP is a better choice. And at this point, you can select either of those two games. Both games work the same game mechanic. Both games will work in the same way. And it just depends which cards you have. Give give your game a name. And of course, you can put whatever you like in the name. And I'm 100% certain that somebody's going to try and do a SQL injection at this point. What that does is it creates a unique endpoint here. That your unique endpoint will allow you to share the game with individuals you want to play with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that in here. And the irony is that's going to show up in the chat before it shows up on the screen. The first couple of people who jump in there, click join the game as player, fill in a name, and when I have a few, I will start a game. Now, I'll choose to be one of the first ones. There are two modes of play, or two ways in which you can interact with the game. The first one is a player. Players get appended to that view there, which is the URL for this particular game, this particular session. Players get a player ID, which allows them to gain access to their own cards. I hope I'll get some people to join the game. If not, I'll have to create at least 3 players in order to play a game. Actually, just go with France. You'll notice that each of these endpoints is unique. I didn't do any login. I didn't have any. There's no identity. There's no access control. So if you're quick enough, you can probably steal my session. You can grab the ID and you can jump into it. But when you have at least 3 players, then you can click Start Game. And once the game is started, no one else can join. You'll see that there's 3 players. Anybody who connects to this link can watch the game that's in progress. And generally, the person who's the Scrum Master or possibly the product owner or whoever it is who's helping to define what the
Rent, the link did not show up on the chat, so I don't know what you did there, but it didn't appear.
Didn't it? I thought I jumped it straight into the chats of the YouTube chat. Anyway, here it is on the chat on the meeting invite. But anyway, all I wanted to show is that people can go onto the link into copy.securedelivery.io and just play their own games. But as a player, you get cards dealt to you, and you can see it's the same cards. They look identical to the cards that are actually in the Cornucopia box. If we were to play a EOP game, then they would look like the cards that are in the Elevation of Privilege deck. So they look like these deck of cards. And you just simply play by dragging a card up onto the game area. And the moment you've done that, Anybody monitoring the game can see that the card's been played. The way you talk through the game, or the way you approach the game, is as described in the video and as described in the steps that I showed earlier. I play the card. I tell the team why I think this card is going to win. Other people on the team, not the person who played it, not the person who's observing, and not the person who's played the card, but the other two players get the opportunity to say, yeah, I think that's a good card. And the moment two players say that's a good card, it scores, and scoring is kept to the bottom here. And essentially, that's the game. Somebody plays a card, next person follows suit. The highest suit of the card, highest card of the suit played first wins a high card bonus. So as you can see, this is currently the highest card. It'd be hard to beat the queen, but if you did, you would then take that score. So if somebody played the king and it scored, So play the king and it scored. Then you'll see that that high card has moved from front to down to here. And that's it. Please do, come back to the project and say, I'd like to help out with things. I haven't yet done a Dutch version, and theoretically I could, but I'd much rather that somebody else wrote the Dutch translation. So grab the YAML files, translate them to Dutch. It is literally just a YAML file that you need to worry about translating. Everything else will automatically generate from that. And that's really all I have. Last thing is that. So the links, a couple of the links that were probably too small to catch earlier, that executive order, if you're curious about it, the OWASP Top 10 in secure design, the threat modeling in a minute playlist, as well as the video playthrough of how to play Cornucopia as a card game.
I think it would be nice to have those links in a clickable format rather than as a display on the screen, but we'll make sure they become available on our website.
Yeah, so I will make sure that you get a copy of the presentation, and these are all clickable links in the presentation. So, excellent.
So, thank you very much for this demonstration. Is there any question? We'll turn to the YouTube comments in a minute. Okay, the first question, I think, from Martin Pearson is directed at me as the host. Do we get a copy of the slides somewhere? Yes, as Grant already told, there will be he will provide us the presentation, and this video as well as the presentation will be put online just like any previous virtual chapter meetings we had, and the links will be also supplied in a clickable format.
And please do feel free to reach out with any questions, anything you want to know about either the project or about what we're doing with Copy. So it looks like they're asking if there's some NL decks. I actually will be in NL middle of February. I'll bring a couple of decks across and I'll make sure I get them out to Martin. That way Martin actually has to meet me for a beer.
Maybe.
I don't see any other questions appearing in the YouTube channel at the moment. If you do, you can contact us otherwise. In the chat I already posted the email address netherlands@owasp.org, which you can use to well, submit your proposal if you would like to present something yourself, or would like to contact the speaker, in which case we will relay the message for you. Rand and Abhishek as well, thank you for giving those presentations, and the audience, thank you all for participating. The next meeting is scheduled at the first day of February. In general, we try to perform a meeting each first day of the month for the remainder of this year. Please stay tuned for the introduction of whoever. Stay tuned. Keep an eye on our website for the announcement on the topic and presenters for that meeting. Thank you all for joining.